Okay, so this is your lesson on argument diagramming. Now this is a higher only skill because it's only in a higher exam and higher course that require you to know how to present arguments in diagrammatical form. So if you're in National 5, you can go enjoy your alternative task for this week. Unfortunately, if you're in higher, you have now got to deal with this. So let's just get straight into it. Your learning intentions for this lesson are to identify different kinds of argument and to understand how to create argument diagrams. Your success criteria is to explain different kinds of argument to your group, but you can't do that really because you're not in the classroom, although you could, I don't know, you could contact someone else in the class and explain these different kinds of argument to your group. Alternatively, you being able to take good notes on the different kinds of argument diagram would be sufficient to show that you're explaining those different kinds of argument. You'll also be able to successfully construct an argument diagram by the end of this lesson, hopefully. So let's get right into it. It would help if this would just go. There we go. So an argument diagram is a visual representation of the structure of an argument. An argument diagram includes the key components of the argument, which are the conclusion and the premises. You should know that already. We're going to have a look at 3 different kinds of argument and a 4th kind, which is a combination or can be any combination of any of the 3. But the 3 kinds are linked arguments, where the premises support one another to get to the conclusion, convergent arguments, where the premises in the argument independently support the conclusion, and serial arguments, where we have intermediate conclusions involved. So let's have a look at the next slide. So first things first, you're going to take detailed notes on this video. Now, I want your notes to be really detailed from it because it serves as a good platform on which to further develop your skills in this lesson. So this video is a really good introduction to argument diagramming. So once you've done that, you can then move on to the next bit of the lesson where I'm going to rant a little bit. So, linked arguments. This is when all premises are necessary, so therefore they have to be there. If they're necessary, they have to be there, otherwise the argument doesn't work. And they're also linked to each other to establish the conclusion. Without the other premises, the argument would be a lot weaker and possibly make the other premise or premises irrelevant. Excuse me. So here's an example. In ordinary language, we've got Edinburgh is in Scotland, Scotland is in the UK, Edinburgh is in the UK. So first things first, you can use your knowledge so far about arguments to see that Edinburgh is in the UK is the conclusion because the first 2 statements give support to it. In standard form, it's P1, Edinburgh is in Scotland, P2, Scotland is in the UK. Inference bar to replace the word therefore. Remember, that shows the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. Therefore, C, Edinburgh is in the UK. In the form of an argument diagram, the argument looks like this here. So 1 plus 2 gives us 3. So what we have is 1, Edinburgh is in Scotland, and, so plus, Scotland is in the UK, point us to the conclusion, 3, that Edinburgh is in the UK. So Edinburgh is in the UK, Edinburgh is in Scotland, 1, Scotland is in the UK, 2, Edinburgh is in the UK, 3. The plus, this is not some basic mathematical equation that 1 and 2 is 3. What it's saying is that premise 1 and premise 2 work together, indicated by the line as well, work together to bring about the conclusion 3. So if we only had premise 1 that Edinburgh is in Scotland, we couldn't get to the conclusion that Edinburgh is in the UK because premise 2 tells us that Scotland's in the UK. So if we don't have premise 2, we can't get to the conclusion. So 1 and 2 work together to bring about the conclusion. Next up, we've got convergent arguments. Now, convergent arguments are where all the premises independently support the conclusion. Without one of the premises, the argument would still stand, it would just make it weaker, but the premise or premises are still relevant. The more premises given, the stronger the argument. So Sorry, I just need a quick drink. In ordinary language, dogs are loyal and friendly pets. There is also evidence that people who have a dog tend to live longer and healthier lives than those who do not. Therefore, dogs are great pets to have. In standard form, it's presented as follows. In an argument diagram, however, it's presented like this. 1 arrow free, 2 arrow free. Free is a conclusion indicated by therefore. So free is at the bottom. So always put the conclusion at the bottom of your argument diagram. That's just the best way to do it. Dogs are loyal and friendly pets. That's premise 1. You could get to from premise 1 to the conclusion without having premise 2. Because you can say, well, dogs are loyal and friendly pets, so they're great pets to have. In the same way with 2, you could just say, well, there's actually evidence to show that people with dogs tend to live longer and healthier lives than those who don't. So therefore, dogs are great pets to have without even thinking about premise 1. So they're independent reasons to support the conclusion. Unlike here, in our first example, where the premises aren't independent, they depend on one another. So 1 and 2, to bring about free, they are dependent on one another, because without saying that Edinburgh is in Scotland, you can't say that Edinburgh is in the UK. It's because that without the other premise, you can't establish that Scotland is in the UK. So, in this argument here, 1 and 2 bring about free independently. Your final kind of argument are serial arguments, and this is where all premises are needed to support the conclusion, but one of them follows on from the other and serves as an intermediate conclusion. So this is the kind of argument where we find intermediate conclusions. So here's your ordinary language example. You are allergic to most nuts, so you are probably allergic to walnuts. For that reason, you should probably not eat this cake with walnuts in it. So the word so indicates an intermediate conclusion. So you are probably allergic to walnuts. So you've got P1, you're allergic to most nuts. Intermediate conclusion, you're probably allergic to walnuts. Conclusion, you should probably not eat this cake with, I should say, walnuts in it. Your argument diagram is 1 arrow 2 arrow 3. So 1 leads to the intermediate conclusion, which leads to the conclusion. Okay? So those are your 3 kinds of argument that you need to identify. This is where it gets a bit complicated. So sometimes arguments may combine elements of convergent, linked, and serial arguments together. So what that means is that you're not just going to simply have a linked argument. You might have an argument which has an element of linked arguments, but it might have elements of other arguments in it. And that's what you might likely see in the higher exam. So I'm going to give you an example here. So your first argument, or this argument is, every crow ever seen has been black. Ravens are related to crows and ravens are black. Thus, the next crow seen will probably be black. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a key. Now, when you create a key, what you're doing is you're saying, well, premise 1 is number 1, premise 2 is number 2, premise 3 is number 3, premise 4 is number 4, etc., etc., etc. The reason why you do that is because you'll actually get a mark for that in the exam, and it shows that basically by showing your key, you're showing that you understand the relationship between the different premises and the argument. If you just put numbers there, if you just went straight to this part of the argument, which we'll get to in a minute, you're not really showing that you understand the content of the argument. So make sure you have a key. First things first, we've got every crow ever seen has been black. Okay, so that is a premise in and of itself. Ravens are related to crows and ravens are black. So this and here suggests that these 2 premises here, so ravens are related to crows and ravens are black, are actually working together. So we've got a link here between these 2 arguments. Ravens are related to crows and, the word and indicates that link, ravens are black. Thus, conclusion, the next crow seen will probably be black. So thus indicates the conclusion. So first of all, let's put our conclusion at the bottom, which is number 4. Okay. Number one, every crow ever seen has been black. Well, that can go here for now. Put that. Oh, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. There we are. I wish I had a whiteboard in front of me, and I wish you were all in my class so I could just show you this properly. What we've got here, though, is 2 and 3 working together. Ravens are related to crows, and ravens are black. So we can put 2 and 3 together. We'll put 4 down a little bit. You don't have to put circles around your numbers. I'm just doing it here to clearly illustrate where each of these premises go. We'll move that down just a little bit then. We then put our bar here to show the relationship between 2 and 3. We need to also put in a plus. Can I just put a plus in there? Probably not, knowing my luck. Nope, so we'll just have to go for a text box. Just put a plus. I'll put it up to, put that in there. So if I just put that here. There we go. So what we have here is we've established the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. We now need to put the arrows in. So insert shape, an arrow in here. So 1 supports the conclusion independently, and also, there we go, 2 and 3 work together to get to the conclusion. So let's have a look. 1 is an independent reason. Okay, it's there in and of itself. Every crow ever seen has been black. 2, ravens are related to crows, and ravens are black. So the 2 and 3 are connected by that word and. They're connected to one another. So they work together. Thus, the conclusion, the next crow seen will probably be black. So remember, you put your key here, and through actually creating a key, you can work out the relationship between them as well. And this is how the diagram would look. So that is your argument diagram for that argument. Let's have a look back at the PowerPoint. So here's an example for you to do. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. I want to pause the video and have a go at creating an argument diagram for this argument. Now, what you need to do first of all, make sure that you numbered the statements, make sure you work out what the conclusion is, make a key for your argument, and then create the argument. So pause the video, and then once you've replayed it or you've resumed it, I will give you the kind of process of doing it. So the process is this: put brackets around each statement and number them, okay? And then also put them into a key. I haven't mentioned that here. So you've done that. Step 2, identify if the argument is linked, convergent, or serial. Well, this argument is linked because all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. We can only get to the conclusion that Socrates is mortal if we have the fact that he is mortal mentioned in the argument and the fact that he's a man. So you can't just have premise 1, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, because Socrates might be a cat, for example. If you say Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, there's no grounds in the argument to believe that. So you need to put all men are mortal to then get to the conclusion that because Socrates is a man, he is mortal because all men are mortal. Okay. You then create the diagram, and the diagram looks like this. 1 plus 2 with your bar and the arrow to number 3. Right, here's another example for you to do. He has no actual superpowers. He is always in a bad mood, and his voice is so deep you can barely understand him. That's why Batman is the worst superhero. I'd like you to create an argument diagram using the process from the previous example for this argument. It looks familiar. That's because we used that argument before for our standard form lesson. So pause the video and then I'll explain. So here's your answer. So how it looks is this. So he has no actual superpowers. He is always in a bad mood. And his voice is so deep you can barely understand him. That's why Batman is a worst superhero. Well, what you've got here, 1 is independent. It goes straight to number 4. So you can have, he has no actual superpowers. That's why Batman is the worst superhero. So it's independent of the other 2 premises. The other premises work together. He is always in a bad mood, and his voice is so deep you can barely understand him. Again, these 2 premises are working together, and you can see that by the word "and" here. You could also, so this is a combination of a linked and a convergent argument, because you could quite easily just have 2 and 3 getting to 4 without number 1. He has no actual superpowers. You could also have 1 without the other 2, which work together to get to the conclusion as well. So that is an example of a complex argument. Now, I'm going to quickly go through some other examples with you. So, I've given some examples here. So, many adults wish they could have their noses fixed. Well, research has shown that 45% of all Americans are displeased with the shape of their noses. So, let's have a look here. I've put all the symbols here. So, first of all, let's number the premises. 1. There we go. Typical. 1. There we go. So 1, many adults wish they could have their noses fixed. 2, research has shown that 45% of all Americans are displeased with the shape of their noses. Okay, so this argument here, we've created our key. 1, many adults wish they could have their noses fixed. 2, research has shown that 45% of all Americans are displeased with the shape of their noses. So what we have here is 2 here supports 1. So the conclusion is many adults wish they could have their noses fixed. And the reason for that is that research has shown that 45% of all Americans are displeased with the shape of their nose. So what we have is 2. Here we go. And I'll just take that down a bit. 2 is giving support to 1. Here we go. And we put an arrow. Insert shapes and an arrow like that. Okay, so 2 supports 1. And that's the relationship there. That's quite a simple one. Here is an example of, well, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll let you guys, I want you to, in addition to your booklet work, I want you to create diagrams for these arguments here. So what I've done is I've given you the first example, and I'm going to let you guys create diagrams for these arguments here, in addition to the ones that are on the booklet. So 2, 3, and 4, I want you to do yourself. And in addition to that, what you're going to do is you're going to read pages 24 to 27 in your booklet and complete the tasks on page 29 and 30. So you're going to, first of all, do the diagrams that I've just put on that Word document. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create, you're going to complete your booklet work. So that is your lesson on argument diagramming. If you have any questions, let me know. This is quite an important part of the unit. It does tend to appear in the exam. It might not though. That's the thing. We just don't know what the exam's going to look like. So it's always good to have the skill set ready for if it does come up. So any questions, do ask.